Manager humiliates black man at hotel, but the next day he buys the hotel and fires the manager. Terence Washington felt the gaze of everyone present in the lobby of the luxurious Royal Palace Hotel in New York City. The embarrassment burned in his chest as the manager, Richard Peterson, held his premium credit card between his fingers as if it was something dirty. "Excuse me, sir, but this card appears irregular. We cannot accommodate guests with questionable documentation," Richard said loudly, ensuring all the other clients in the elegant lobby could hear. "Perhaps you'd prefer to try another establishment more suited to your profile." Terence took a deep breath, maintaining the composure that had always defined him in the most tense moments of his life. At 42, he had faced situations like this more times than he cared to remember. "This card is perfectly valid, and my reservation was confirmed 2 weeks ago. If you prefer, I can use another card or pay in cash," Terence replied with dignity. The smile on Richard's face was pure disdain. "It's not a matter of payment method, sir. It's a matter of suitability. Understand that we have a standard to uphold at this hotel." A woman at the reception lowered her eyes, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Other staff pretended to be busy, but Terence noticed they were all watching the scene. "I'd like to speak to the hotel's owner," Terence requested. Richard's laughter echoed through the marble lobby. "Mr. Walter Hoffman," the manager laughed again. "People like you don't have access to men like him. Now, if you could leave before I need to call security." Terence stared directly into the manager's eyes for a few seconds. Without a word, he took his card back, turned, and walked to the exit, with his dignity intact. Once inside the executive car waiting for him, Terence made a call. "Marcus, it's me. Speed up the process. I want the deal closed by tomorrow morning at any cost." On the other end of the line, the lawyer sounded surprised. "But Terence, we were planning to assess the structure before—" "The conditions have changed. I don't need to assess anything else. I want the deal closed immediately and schedule a meeting with the entire hotel staff for tomorrow at 10 a.m. That same night, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Terence watched the city lights. Born in the outskirts of New Orleans, he had built his empire from scratch. He started as a mail clerk, earned a scholarship, graduated with honors in business and finance, and through relentless work and a unique vision for business, turned small opportunities into an internationally respected conglomerate. His philosophy had always been the same: to know his investments from the inside, experiencing them as an ordinary customer before closing any deal. That was how he built his reputation as a shrewd and fair investor. The Royal Palace Hotel was just another potential acquisition on his list. Walter Hoffman, the current owner, was a 78-year-old man looking to retire, but wanting to ensure his legacy was in good hands. Negotiations were already advanced, but Terence liked to personally experience the environment and service before finalizing any purchase. That visit had revealed far more than he expected. The next morning, the lobby of the Royal Palace Hotel was as impeccable as ever. Richard Peterson adjusted his tie as he reviewed reception details. Today would be an important day. Owner Walter Hoffman had called an extraordinary meeting with all staff, something that hadn't happened in years. Rumors of the hotel's sale had been circulating for months, but no one had concrete information. Richard wasn't worried. With 10 years as general manager, he considered himself untouchable, Walter's right-hand man. Any new owner would need him to maintain the establishment's standards. The team gathered in the main hall, usually reserved for gala events. Walter Hoffman, in his impeccable suit and white hair, entered accompanied by a man Richard didn't immediately recognize. When he got a better look, his stomach dropped. It couldn't be. "Good morning, everyone," Walter began in his calm, respected voice. "I've called you here today for an important announcement. After 35 years at the helm of the Royal Palace Hotel, I've decided it's time to pass the torch. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you the new owner, who will take over not just this hotel but our entire chain, Mr. Terence Washington." All eyes turned to Terence, now dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Richard paled, his legs feeling weak. For those who don't know him, Mr. Washington is the founder and CEO of the New Horizon Group, with investments in hospitality, real estate, and technology across the United States and abroad. Walter continued. I'm confident the Royal Palace Hotel will be in excellent hands. Terence stepped up to the microphone, his gaze sweeping over everyone before settling on Richard. I thank Mr. Hoffman for his trust, and I look forward to working with all of you. The Royal Palace Hotel has a legacy of excellence, and I intend not just to maintain it, but to raise it to new heights. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. As Terence spoke about his plans for the future, Richard felt smaller and smaller. The room seemed to spin around him. He remembered with horror every word he'd said to the man who was now his boss. People like, "You don't get access to men like him." The irony was too cruel. After the initial speech, Terence announced he'd like to hold individual meetings with each department manager, starting with the general manager. The meeting room on the top floor, which had once belonged to Walter Hoffman, now bore a discreet plaque on the door. Terence Washington, President. When Richard entered, Terence was seated behind the mahogany desk, reviewing some documents. Without looking up, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Have a seat, please." Richard obeyed, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Mr. Washington, I'd like to explain about yesterday. It was a misunderstanding. Terence raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not interested in explanations, Mr. Peterson. I'm interested in results." His tone was professional and distant. "I've studied your record at this hotel. 10 years as general manager, consistent financial results, low employee turnover. Impressive numbers." Richard felt a flicker of relief. Maybe there was hope. "However," Terence continued, "I've also heard some stories about your management style. Special treatment for certain guests, inappropriate remarks, favoritism in employee promotions." The relief vanished instantly. "Mr. Washington, I strictly follow the hotel's standards. Not all guests understand that a black man can't be a guest at a 5-star hotel unless he's a football player or a singer," Terence finished, finally meeting Richard's eyes. "Is that what you were going to say?" The silence in the room was heavy. Richard knew any word could be his final sentence. "No, of course not," he stammered. Terence leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him. "Mr. Peterson, I believe there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who learn from their mistakes and those who keep making them. You strike me as intelligent enough to belong to the first group." Richard nodded nervously, unsure where this conversation was headed. "I could fire you right now and it would be absolutely justified," Terence continued. "But I don't believe that would solve the problem. It would just transfer to another establishment a manager who would keep humiliating people based on the color of their skin or their supposed social status." "Sir, I never—" "Spare us, please," Terence cut him off. "I have a different proposal. You'll remain at this hotel, but not as general manager." Richard's shoulders slumped. It was a dismissal in disguise. "Starting today, you'll spend 1 month in each department of the hotel. You'll begin with housekeeping, then move to maintenance, the kitchen, reception, and so on. I want you to learn every role, every challenge, every employee. I want you to understand what it truly takes to make this hotel run." Richard's eyes widened. "You're demoting me to a janitor." "No, Mr. Peterson, I'm giving you the opportunity to fully understand your workplace, something you've clearly never done. At the end of this period, we'll talk again, and I'll decide your future with the company. And if I refuse, then the termination will be immediate, and I'll make sure to detail the reasons in your reference letter." Richard swallowed hard. The industry was small, and a negative recommendation from a businessman of Terence Washington's caliber would be the end of his career. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow at 6 a.m. The cleaning crew arrives early," Terence replied, turning back to his documents. "You may leave now." Still dazed, Richard stood and walked to the door. "Oh, Mr. Peterson," Terence called, stopping him. "Your direct supervisor will be Miss Dorothy. I believe you know her. She's been cleaning your office for 8 years. The next morning, Richard arrived at the hotel before dawn. He had barely slept, torn between humiliation and the fear of losing everything he'd built. In the staff locker room, he found a uniform with his name on it. It felt surreal to swap his Italian suit for a janitor's outfit. "Miss Dorothy, A black woman around 60 years old was waiting for him in the hallway. Her expression was a mix of surprise and a faint trace of satisfaction she couldn't quite hide. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson. Today you'll be responsible for the first floor restrooms. There are 24 in total. Here's your cart with the supplies." Richard looked at the cart loaded with cleaning products, mops and brushes. The rubber gloves seemed to mock him. "Miss Dorothy, maybe we could start with something more." "More what, Mr. Peterson?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Restrooms are essential to the guest experience. You always said that in team meetings, remember?" In the hours that followed, Richard discovered muscles he never knew he had. Cleaning restrooms was exhausting work, far more demanding than he'd imagined. His hands, used only to signing documents and typing on computers, now burned from the chemicals, even with the gloves. The hardest part, though, was the guests' reactions. Some ignored him completely, as if he were invisible. Others seemed uncomfortable with his presence, hurrying to leave. One man even tossed a wet towel on the floor, inches from the laundry bin, and walked out without a word. By the end of the day, exhausted and his dignity in tatters, Richard ran into Terence in the 6th floor hallway. The new owner was personally inspecting the facilities, something Walter Hoffman had rarely done. "How was your first day, Mr. Peterson?" Terence asked with genuine interest. Richard hesitated. He wanted to say it was absurd, an unnecessary humiliation, but something stopped him. "Exhausting," he finally answered. "I had no idea cleaning restrooms would be so demanding." Terence nodded. "And the staff? Did you get a chance to know them better?" The question caught him off guard. Richard noticed that even after working side by side with the cleaning crew for hours, he had barely exchanged words with them. He had been so absorbed in his own discomfort that he hadn't paid attention to the people around him. "Not much," he admitted. "What a shame. They're fascinating people," Terence remarked. Ms. Dorothy, for example, studied education but never got a job in the field. She raised 3 children on her own, and all of them graduated from college. One is a doctor at Mass General Hospital. Richard blinked a few times, taking in the information. He had never seen Ms. Dorothy as anything more than the person who cleaned his office. "Tomorrow, try to get to know them better. Don't miss the chance to learn," Terence suggested before walking away. In the days that followed, Richard began noticing details he had always ignored, like how Mr. Jenkins from maintenance could fix practically anything in the hotel, saving thousands in repair costs, or how the housekeepers could turn a chaotic room into a work of art in under 20 minutes. By the 2nd week, while working, in the laundry room, Richard met Jasmine, a young woman studying engineering at night and working at the hotel during the day to pay for school. She had her own system for organizing linens that drastically cut down restocking time in the rooms. "Why have you never mentioned this in team meetings?" Richard asked, impressed by the efficiency of her method. Jasmine shrugged. "I tried once, but the general manager said we didn't have the budget for procedural changes." She said it without a hint of irony. Richard's face burned. He vaguely remembered dismissing suggestions from lower-level employees without really listening. At the time, it had seemed like a matter of hierarchy and authority. Now it just seemed like foolishness. In the 3rd week, Richard was assigned to the kitchen. To his surprise, he discovered the sous chef, Anthony, was from the same neighborhood where he had grown up. The difference was, while Richard had the chance to attend good schools thanks to his parents' sacrifices, Anthony had taught himself the trade by watching videos online and practicing at home. "You're from Queens too?" Anthony asked, surprised. "I never would have guessed the way you used to talk to us." The unfinished sentence weighed heavier than any direct accusation. Richard had worked so hard to erase his roots, to distance himself from his humble past, that he had become exactly the kind of person he had despised when he was young. In the 4th week, working at the front desk, Richard faced his biggest challenge, dealing directly with guests. That was when he witnessed a scene that shook him deeply. A white executive spoke rudely to a receptionist over a minor booking error. The words, the tone, the body language, it was like looking into a distorted mirror. The employee kept a polite smile, but her eyes held the same discomfort Richard had seen so many times. without ever truly noticing. At the end of the 4 weeks, Terence called him back into his office. This time, when Richard entered, the businessman stood and offered his hand, something he hadn't done at their first meeting. "Have a seat, please. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this experience." Richard took a deep breath. Over the past month, he had rehearsed this moment in his mind dozens of times. He had considered different approaches, playing the victim, downplaying his past actions. But now, sitting there, only the truth seemed to matter. "It was eye-opening," he began. "I realized I didn't really know the hotel I was managing, or the people who make it run." Terence watched him closely, not interrupting. "I realized I treated people based on assumptions. I judged by appearance, by position, by prejudices I didn't even know I had," Richard continued. "And the worst part is, I come from humble beginnings myself. Somehow, I convinced myself I had to step on others to maintain my status." "Recognizing our mistakes is already a big step," Terence remarked. "The question is, what do you plan to do with that realization? If you give me a second chance as manager, I promise—" Terence raised his hand, gently interrupting him. "I'm not talking about titles or positions, Mr. Peterson. I'm talking about purpose. What have you learned this month that can contribute not just to the hotel, but to the lives of the people who work here?" The question caught Richard off guard. He had never thought about his job that way. To him, managing the hotel was about numbers, results, impressing superiors. He had never considered the real-life impact his decisions and attitude had on hundreds of people. "I learned that a lot of talent goes to waste because I never gave people the chance to express themselves," he finally answered. "I learned that efficiency doesn't just mean cutting costs, but valuing good ideas no matter where they come from. And I learned that respect isn't something you demand because of a title, it's something you earn through character." Terence smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Exactly what I hoped to hear," he said. "I have a proposal for you, Mr. Peterson. I'm creating a new department in the group, Human Development and Inclusion. I want people from different backgrounds and experiences to have opportunities to grow in our company, as long as they have talent and drive. And I believe someone who's seen both sides, like you, would be the ideal person to lead it." Richard was momentarily speechless. "But why me? After what I did, how can you trust me with this?" "Because people who've never made mistakes rarely understand the value of change," Terence replied. "And because I believe your experience this past month, combined with your managerial skills, can create something truly transformative." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. 6 months had passed since that conversation. The Royal Palace Hotel was unrecognizable, not in its facilities, which had always been luxurious, but in its atmosphere. Employees smiled genuinely, guests raved about the exceptional service, and occupancy rates hit record highs. The Human Development and Inclusion program, led by Richard, had uncovered talent in every department. Jasmine from housekeeping now coordinated a sustainability project that reduced the hotel's water consumption by 30%. Anthony, the sous chef, had been promoted, and his new menu, inspired by inner-city cuisine, was earning praise from food critics. Even more significant was the vocational training program for inner-city youth. Twice a week, public school students visited the hotel to learn about hospitality, culinary arts, and management. Many had already been hired as apprentices. One particularly busy afternoon, a black man walked into the hotel. He wore simple but clean and well-kept clothes. At the front desk, the receptionist greeted him with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" "Good afternoon. I have an interview with Mr. Richard Peterson. My name is Marcus Johnson." "Of course, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Peterson is expecting you. Please follow me." As they walked through the hotel's elegant halls, Marcus seemed slightly out of place, as if he wasn't used to such luxurious surroundings. The receptionist, noticing his discomfort, gave him a reassuring smile. "Is this your first time at the Royal Palace?" Yes, he replied. Actually, I've never stayed at a five-star hotel before. Welcome then. We're honored to have you. If you need anything during your visit, just ask. Marcus nodded, surprised by the kindness. When they reached Richard's office, the receptionist opened the door for him and wished him luck before stepping away. Richard stood to greet him, extending his hand respectfully. Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. We two spoke for over an hour. Marcus had recently been released after 5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. His criminal record, even after proving his innocence, made reintegrating into the workforce difficult. I know how hard it is to start over when society has already formed an opinion about you, Richard said. But here, we offer a real opportunity, not charity. I read your resume and was impressed by your business administration background. It was hard finishing college while... Marcus hesitated. While fighting to prove your innocence, I know, Richard finished. I read about your case in the papers. What happened to you was unacceptable, and unfortunately, it's not an isolated incident. Marcus looked at Richard with a mix of surprise and caution. With all due respect, Mr. Peterson, why would someone like you care about someone like me? Richard smiled, recognizing the irony of a question he himself might have asked months ago. Because I learned the hard way that judging people by appearances, or one aspect of their lives, is the biggest mistake we can make. And because I believe talents like yours shouldn't be wasted because of prejudice. Marcus was hired as an administrative assistant that same day. In the weeks that followed, his competence and dedication impressed not just Richard, but everyone who worked with him. One Friday morning, Terence Washington visited the hotel for a routine inspection. Passing through the administrative department, he saw Marcus focused on spreadsheets. How's everything going, Marcus? He asked, stopping by his desk. Marcus stood immediately, still unaccustomed to being addressed by the company owner. Very well, Mr. Washington. I'm finalizing the efficiency report Mr. Peterson requested. Terence glanced at Marcus's computer screen. The report was detailed and professional. Impressive. You have a talent for data analysis. Thank you, sir. It was my specialty in college. Marcus developed a new system to track the hotel's resource consumption, Richard added, walking over. We've identified waste patterns we never noticed before. Terence nodded, satisfied. This is exactly the kind of innovation we look for. Ideas from different perspectives, people who see beyond the obvious. Later, in Richard's office, Terence expressed his satisfaction with the changes. In 6 months, you've transformed. Not just the numbers, but the culture of this place. I'm truly impressed. Richard shook his head. The credit isn't mine. It's the people who were always here, just waiting for a chance to prove their worth. And it took someone who recognized that, Terence insisted. Not everyone could turn a humiliating experience into an opportunity for growth like you did. Richard smiled, remembering their first conversation in that same office. You know what's ironic? I spent years running from my roots, trying to fit into a world I thought would only accept a polished, proper version of me. In the process, I became exactly the kind of person who made me feel inferior when I was young. And now? Now I understand that my story isn't something to hide, but the source of my greatest strength. Growing up with hardships gave me a perspective that can't be taught in any business school. Terence nodded, understanding perfectly. His own journey had taught him similar lessons. We're expanding the program to the other hotels in the group, he announced. I want you to lead the project nationally. It's a big responsibility, but I believe you're more than ready. Richard's eyes widened slightly. It's an honor, Mr. Washington. I won't let you down. It's not me you shouldn't let down, Richard, Terence corrected gently. It's all the people whose lives will be changed by this work. The New Horizon Group's Human Development and Inclusion Program soon became a benchmark in the U.S. hotel industry. Newspapers and trade magazines ran features on the initiative, highlighting how an inclusive business model could also be highly profitable. In one of those interviews, a reporter asked Terence what had motivated him to implement such an innovative program. I believe companies don't exist just to generate profit, but to transform society, he replied. For too long, Talented people were excluded not because they lacked ability, but because of deep-rooted prejudices. We're just correcting that imbalance. What Terence didn't mention was the specific incident that had sparked it all. Some long-time employees knew the story, but to most new hires it was just corporate legend. The day the powerful CEO had been humiliated at the front desk of his own hotel before he even bought it. A year after the program's launch, the New Horizon Group held an event to celebrate the results and recognize the employees who had contributed most to its success. The ballroom at the Royal Palace Hotel was elegantly decorated, and every employee, from housekeeping to executives, was invited. Richard, now the National Director of Human Development and Inclusion, watched with satisfaction at the diversity of people in attendance. It was a portrait of the real United States, people of different colors, backgrounds, and stories, all celebrating together. Marcus Johnson, promoted to Administrative Coordinator, approached with a glass in hand. A toast to the man who changed. "Our lives," he said, raising his drink. Richard gave a modest smile. "I didn't change your lives. You already had all the potential. I was just lucky enough to see it." "Modesty doesn't suit you, Richard," Marcus teased. "You literally changed the hiring policy of one of the biggest hotel chains in the country. Do you know how many people, like me, got a second chance because of that?" Before Richard could answer, the lights dimmed and Terence took the stage. The chatter died down at once. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "We're here to celebrate not just impressive numbers, but transformed lives. In 1 year, our inclusion program has hired over 200 people who faced barriers in the workforce. People with disabilities, former inmates who've paid their debt to society, young people from underserved neighborhoods, professionals, over 50 single mothers, people society often overlooks but who've proven their extraordinary worth." The audience applauded enthusiastically. "The results speak for themselves," Terence continued. "Our occupancy rate has risen by 22%. Customer satisfaction has reached an all-time high. And most importantly, we've created an environment where everyone feels they belong, where everyone has a voice." Terence paused, his gaze finding Richard's. In the crowd. None of this would be possible without the exceptional leadership of someone who learned the hardest lesson of all, that our greatest mistakes can become our greatest triumphs if we have the courage to face them and learn from them. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our National Director of Human Development and Inclusion, Richard Peterson. Richard walked to the stage amid enthusiastic applause. He had never imagined being there, recognized not for intimidating subordinates or impressing superiors, but for how much he had contributed to changing lives. As he took the microphone, he felt an emotion he couldn't contain. "Just over a year ago, I was a very different person," he began. "Someone who believed human worth could be measured by appearance, background, or social status." The room fell completely silent. "I had to lose everything I valued to discover what truly matters. I had to experience humiliation to understand what so many people feel every day. And I needed a second chance to realize that everyone deserves one." Richard looked at Terence, who watched him with approval. "Our program isn't charity, it's business strategy at its finest. Because by including people with different experiences and perspectives, we create an environment where innovation thrives naturally. And by treating every human being with dignity, we earn loyalty and dedication no salary can buy." The applause grew even louder as he finished his speech. Employees who once trembled at his presence now hugged him and thanked him for the opportunity. Ms. Dorothy, still the cleaning team supervisor, but now also an instructor in the training program, approached him with a wide smile. "Who would have thought, Mr. Peterson? From the bathroom to the boardroom in a year." Richard laughed, remembering his first day with a mop in hand. "The best promotion I ever got, Ms. Dorothy, because it taught me the real value of work." The celebration lasted well into the night. At one point, Terence pulled Richard aside to a quieter corner. "You know what impresses me most about you, Richard? It's not the transformation itself, but how quickly it happened. Many people go their whole lives without recognizing their mistakes, let alone correcting them." Richard thought for a moment. "I think deep down, I always knew I was wrong." I just needed someone to show me a different path. Well, I'm glad it was me, Terence replied, especially because when I first walked into this hotel, I wasn't looking to change anyone. I just wanted a room for the night. They both laughed, the tension of their first meeting now a distant memory. What happened that day reminded me of all the times I was judged for the color of my skin before I made my fortune, Terence continued, more serious. And how even after success it still happens constantly. The difference is now I have the power to turn those experiences into real change. And for that, I'll always be grateful, Richard said. Not just for the second chance, but for showing me I could be better than I ever believed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. 2 years had passed since that celebration. The New Horizon Group's inclusion program had expanded beyond the hotel chain, influencing other companies and even public policy. Richard, now a sought-after speaker, shared his story of transformation at conferences across the country. His message was simple, but powerful. Anyone can change, as long as they have the courage to face their prejudices. On a Wednesday afternoon, while working in his office at the Royal Palace Hotel, Richard received an unexpected visitor. It was a young man dressed elegantly, appearing to be in his early 20s. Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson. My name is Nathan Hoffman. I'm the grandson of Walter Hoffman, the former owner of this hotel. Richard stood up to greet him. Of course, Nathan. Your grandfather was a legend in the hospitality industry. How can I help you? The young man seemed a little nervous. Front of his desk. Any specific aspect you'd like to focus on? Nathan settled into the chair and turned on his recorder. Actually, yes. I'm particularly interested in understanding what motivated the creation of the program. The reports mention several factors, but I feel there's a more personal story behind it. Richard smiled faintly. The question touched right at the heart of the entire transformation. You're right. There is a personal story, and it begins with an arrogant man who believed he could judge people's worth by their appearance. That man was me. For the next 2 hours, Richard recounted the entire story to Nathan. Without omitting his mistakes or downplaying his flaws, he spoke about the humiliation he inflicted on Terence, his time working in different departments of the hotel, and how that experience completely changed his worldview. Nathan listened, fascinated. It's amazing how something seemingly negative could lead to so much positive change, he remarked when Richard finished his account. Have you ever imagined what might have happened if you hadn't humiliated Mr. Washington that day? The question took Richard by surprise. Honestly, I've never thought about it. I probably would have remained the same arrogant manager. The hotel would have been sold anyway, and I'd have been fired without the chance to learn and grow. Or maybe Mr. Washington wouldn't have even bought the hotel, Nathan suggested. He might have just walked away from the deal after being mistreated. That's true, and hundreds of lives transformed by the program would never have had that opportunity. Nathan asked a few more technical questions about how the program worked, but Richard could tell the young man was reflecting deeply on something. May I ask one last question, Mr. Peterson? A more personal one. Of course. Do you regret what you did that day? Humiliating Mr. Washington? Richard took a moment before answering. It's a complicated question. Do I regret being the kind of person who could humiliate someone based on prejudice? Absolutely. But I understand that mistake was necessary for my transformation. If I hadn't hit rock bottom with my own arrogance, I might never have found the humility to change. The young man nodded, satisfied with the answer. My grandfather always said the true test of a person's character isn't never making mistakes, but what they do after making them. Your grandfather was a wise man, Richard agreed. It's a shame I didn't have the chance to know him. Better before the hotel was sold. Nathan gathered his things, preparing to leave. Thank you for your time, Mr. Peterson. Your story is truly inspiring. I hope your project is a success. If you need any more information, I'm happy to help." As Nathan reached the door, he turned back with a curious expression. "You know, there's something that's always puzzled me. Why did Mr. Washington decide to give a second chance to someone who treated him so poorly? Most people would have just fired you and moved on." Richard smiled. "That's a question I've asked myself many times. The answer Terence gave me when I asked was that he wasn't interested in punishment but in transformation. That if he simply fired me, I'd carry my prejudices somewhere else. By offering me a chance to change, he wasn't just helping me but everyone who'd cross my path in the future." "What an extraordinary perspective," Nathan remarked. "That's why he is who he is," Richard concluded, "and why I work every day to honor the trust he placed in me." After Nathan left, Richard remained for a few minutes, gazing at the city skyline from his office window. It was a privileged view, not just because of the building's height, but because of the journey that had brought him there. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Terence. "Richard, how are things over there?" "Everything's in order, Terence. I just gave an interview to Walter Hoffman's grandson about the inclusion program." "Nathan? He's a brilliant young man. He'll be a great businessman one day, but with values very different from those that dominated his grandfather's generation. I noticed that. He has a remarkably sensitive insight for someone so young." There was a brief pause before Terence continued. "I have some news to share. We've just acquired the Star Hotels chain in the Southwest, 15 locations across 5 states." "That's excellent. Will we expand the program there too?" "That's exactly why I'm calling. I want you to personally oversee the program's implementation at the first location in Miami. It'll be a bigger challenge than before. The chain has a very traditional culture, and some of the managers have been there for decades." Richard immediately understood what Terence was implying. These would be people resistant to change, likely holding the same prejudices he himself once had. "When should I leave?" "Next week, if possible. We've already arranged everything for your stay there." "I'll be ready." "One more thing," Terence added. "Marcus Johnson will be promoted to fill your current position while you're away. He's proven exceptional in his work, and I think he's more than prepared." Richard smiled. Marcus, the former inmate he'd hired 2 years ago, had truly excelled. It was only fair he take on more responsibility. "Excellent choice." No one understands the spirit of the program better than he does. After hanging up, Richard called Sarah, his assistant. "Sarah, I need you to schedule a meeting with the entire team for tomorrow. I have an important announcement to make." The next morning, with everyone gathered in the auditorium, Richard shared news of his temporary assignment in Miami and Marcus's promotion. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, especially for Marcus, who was dearly loved by all. After the meeting, Marcus sought Richard in his office. "I wanted to thank you personally for your trust," he said. "When I got out of prison, I thought my professional life was over. I never imagined that 3 years later, I'd be stepping into a leadership role at a company like this." Richard placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You earned this on your own merit, Marcus. I just opened the door. You were the one who walked through it with excellence." Marcus hesitated before asking, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why did you decide to give me a chance?" A lot of business people talk about second chances, but they back off when they see a criminal record, even after innocence is proven. Richard remembered his own journey, how he'd been judged and later given a chance at redemption. "Because someone gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. The difference is you were wronged, while I had actually made the mistake I paid for. If I, who was guilty, deserved a second chance, how could I deny it to someone who was innocent?" Marcus's eyes shone with emotion. "I'll honor your trust. I promise you won't regret it." "I know I won't. You've already proven your worth many times." The following week, before leaving for Miami, Richard was invited to dinner at Terence's home. It was a rare occasion. The CEO seldom mixed personal and professional life, and few executives from the group had ever been to his residence. The house was impressive yet surprisingly welcoming. It lacked the ostentation one might expect from a billionaire, instead striking an elegant balance between luxury and comfort. Artworks by American artists adorned the walls, many depicting Scenes of everyday life in working-class neighborhoods and traditional communities. Terence greeted him personally at the door, dressed casually, a far cry from the impeccable suits he wore to business meetings. "Welcome to my home, Richard. It's a pleasure to have you here." During dinner, served on a balcony overlooking the ocean, the two spoke not about business but about their personal lives, something they had never done before. Terence shared stories of his childhood in a poor neighborhood in New Orleans, how he lost his father at a young age, and how his mother worked as a housekeeper to support 3 children. He spoke about the prejudice he faced in school, how he was the only black student in his college class, which he attended on a full academic scholarship. "You know, Richard, when I walked into that hotel 3 years ago, it wasn't the first time I'd been treated that way. It happens so often I've almost developed a sixth sense for when discrimination is coming." "That must be exhausting," Richard remarked. "It's like carrying an invisible weight all the time, Terence." "Agreed. Even now, with all the success and recognition, it still happens. I walk into a luxury store, and the salespeople discreetly follow me as if I'm going to steal something. At a fine restaurant, I'm often seated in the back, never near the front." Richard felt a wave of shame as he realized he had done similar things himself. How do you handle it without becoming bitter? Terence thought for a moment. At first it was hard. The anger and frustration were almost unbearable, but over time I realized I had 2 choices: let other people's prejudice define who I was, or use that experience as fuel to create something better. So that's how the inclusion program came about? Actually, no. For years, my approach was to prove my worth through success. I thought if I became rich and powerful enough, the prejudice would disappear. That was naive of me. Terence poured more wine for them both before continuing. What changed my perspective was exactly that incident at the hotel. That day, I realized no matter how much money I had, to some people, I'd always just be a black man who didn't belong there. And then I asked myself, what if, instead of just shielding myself from prejudice, I used my position to create opportunities for others facing the same struggle? "So it was a transformation for you too," Richard observed. "Yes, but different from yours. You had to confront and overcome your own biases. I had to change how I responded to other people's prejudice." The conversation continued late into the night, touching on deep and personal topics. As Richard was about to leave, he asked a question that had puzzled him for years. "Terence, there's something I've always wanted to know. That first day, why didn't you just fire me? It would have been the easiest thing, and no one would have questioned your decision." Terence smiled. "I thought about it, I'll admit, but when I saw your reaction upon recognizing me, something intrigued me. I saw fear, of course, but I also saw genuine shame. And I thought, here's someone who understands they've done something wrong, even if they don't yet grasp just how wrong. There was potential for change, and I always prefer to transform rather than destroy. You took a big risk. I could have been incapable of change. Yes, it was a risk, but I'd already studied your track record as a manager. You were efficient, meticulous, dedicated. Your failure wasn't in your professional ability, but in your human values. And values can be rebuilt when someone is willing to do the necessary work." As they said goodbye at the door, Terence made one final remark. "What you'll face in Miami may be the biggest challenge of your career so far. It's not just individual prejudices, but an entire corporate culture built on rigid hierarchies and exclusion. You'll need all your experience and empathy." "I'm ready," Richard assured him. "I know you are, that's why you're the right person for this job." When you arrived at the Royal Palace as general manager, you were efficient but limited by your biases. When you left to implement the program at other hotels, you were committed but still proving to yourself that you'd changed. Now, you have the confidence and experience to transform not just procedures, but mindsets. Richard felt the weight of responsibility, but also the confidence of being prepared for it. "I won't let you down. I know you won't. Good luck in Miami." The trip to Miami would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Richard's journey. He'd carry with him not just the lessons learned, but the conviction that anyone, when given the opportunity and the right tools, can profoundly transform themselves. The story of the arrogant manager who became an agent of social change would continue to inspire people across the country. And it all started with what seemed like a negative encounter, which became the spark for a quiet revolution in the American corporate world. There were no traces left of the man who'd once humiliated a guest because of their skin color. In his place stood someone who deeply understood the value of human dignity and worked tirelessly to ensure others also had the chance to prove their worth. Richard's true redemption wasn't in the position he held or the recognition he received, but in the lives he helped transform every day. Every new employee hired through the program, every barrier broken, every prejudice overcome was a testament to the power of genuine change. And in the end, the story of Richard and Terence was a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest falls may just be the start of our most important rise. End of story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments, have you ever gone through a profound transformation like Richard's? We'd love to hear your story.